Hello, friends. Welcome back to the podcast. While I have been sharing content all summer long in the MilSpouse Transformation series, I have personally stepped away from the podcast. I recorded all of these episodes before the summer began because this has been a PCS summer for me. Another overseas move, and this one away from the ocean waves and blue skies and adventure of Hawaii to a place filled with cornfields and about as far away from the ocean as you can get. And now I am finally starting to get settled and I am back to recording new episodes for you. And I went back and forth on this. Like, do I jump back into the podcast? How do I wrap up this summer series? Where do we begin? And so today's episode is not about a particular topic. It's not about takeaways or helpful strategies for living a life of purpose. It's just a conversation between you and me to talk about this series, to talk about my summer and what's coming up in the coming days. So let's go ahead and dive in. Welcome to More Than a MilSpouse, the podcast for military spouses who want to live with more meaning and less overwhelm. I'm your host, Christine, seasoned military spouse, mom of 3, life coach, and your guide to intentionally designing a life you're excited about as a military spouse. I'm here to help you get the clarity you need so you can get unstuck and unlock your purpose and potential. Because you, my friend, are more than a MilSpouse. You have something valuable to offer. And when you pursue the things that light your heart on fire, you trade frustration for fulfillment and isolation for a life of impact. It's time to discover who you are meant to be, because together we can change the world. Okay, guys, tell me what you think. New podcast art is finally up. After 3.5 years now of doing this podcast, I decided it was time for a little refresh. So let me know what you think. And if you are brand new to More Than a MilSpouse, let me just briefly catch you up on the history of this podcast. I started recording these episodes in 2021 because I knew that we needed to have more conversations about how to thrive as a military spouse. How do we pursue our own goals and dreams? How do we find purpose and really find fulfillment in this life that seems to take so much from us, that has so much added stress and challenge that so many people don't face, that they don't have to go through? Like, how do we make the most of this lifestyle that we live? I was stationed in Guam when I started the podcast. Then we PCS'd to Hawaii, where I spent almost 2 years there. And then this summer we moved again, and now we are back in cornfields, and it has been a transition for sure. If you go back and listen to episode 206, which I recorded back in May, that was me talking about preparing for this PCS and knowing that it was going to be a big change for our family, being asked to move when we had requested to stay, and then being told that the location that we were originally going to was and had gotten excited about was no longer happening. Instead, we're getting sent back to a base that we had already been stationed at. And if you have ever been stationed at the same location twice, it is a very different experience the second time around. This is the second time that we have been stationed at a base for more than one time, if that makes sense. So I already kind of knew that it's going to be different this time, but having all of that happening and trying to process all of those feelings and emotions and knowing that there was going to be a sense of grief in leaving a location that I loved and moving to a location that I was not as excited about, and helping my kids through that transition season was going to be a lot. So what I did was reach out to some people that I knew had a lot of value to offer this community. And we put together this summer MilSpouse Transformation series because so many times we think about life change as being something that's really big or that you have to go all in on. And I really wanted to break it down and say, transforming your life from the inside out is, number one, absolutely possible. And number two, it doesn't have to be a big thing. It is the small tweaks, the tiny changes that can ultimately make a big difference in our life. So we broke our lives down into 10 key areas to look at how we can begin to make those tweaks in different areas. And all of us are going to be at a different place in life. We're going to have different strengths, different weaknesses, different opportunities for growth. And so it's really about looking at your life as a whole and saying, what 1 to 2 areas, if I made a change in this area, it would make a big difference in my life overall. And so I hope you got a ton of value from listening to these conversations this summer. I would love to know what episodes were most meaningful to you, which interviews you loved, how this helped you. So come pop inside our Facebook community, send me an email, direct message me on Instagram. Let me know what was most meaningful to you, because that helps me as I continue to create content to help us thrive in this military lifestyle. Last week, we aired the last part of the series, and I said, hey, next week we're going to tie a bow on this and talk about what we learned and what I walked through this summer, and I'm going to give you this nice little recap, this nice little bow. I had in my mind when I first recorded that this is all going to be wrapped up. I'm going to be done moving. I'm going to be settled. Even though I know that getting settled in a new place takes some time, I was hoping that the moving portion would be done and I would be ready to kind of embrace whatever this next season of life looks like. But as I am recording this a few days early, I realized that is not actually going to be a reality. I'm not done because a few days before this comes out is when we are getting our last shipment of stuff. So I really started intentionally working on PCSing on May 1st. That's when I started pulling things out, organizing things, getting rid of things, not just thinking about the move, but carving out time in my day to put the stuff where it needed to go, to get rid of stuff that we no longer used, and really doing the work of PCSing. So that was May 1st. And here we are at almost the end of August, 4 months later, and we will hopefully be getting our last shipment. I'm very curious to see how this goes, because if you move overseas, one of the options you get is to put things in storage. So we knew that when we left the States, we were going to be moving to a house on base that was roughly half the size of the house we left. So we got rid of a lot of stuff, and then we put as much as we could in long-term storage because we knew that we needed to downsize by half. And it's one thing to downsize a little bit, but that is a daunting task to try to figure out, how do I live an organized life in a very much smaller space? And so we did it. It was a little cozy. It took us some time to figure out how to navigate life in a smaller house, but that was helped by the fact that some of the stuff we wanted to hold on to long term, but we don't necessarily use on a regular basis. We put all of that stuff in long-term storage. It has been in storage for 4 years now. I know kind of what is in storage, but not entirely all of it. So some things I am very excited to have again, like my carpet cleaner. And there's some things that I have no idea what's in there, and I will find out, and it will be an adventure, and we will figure out how much of it do we actually want to hold on to, and how much of it after 4 years we're like, why do we still have this? So it's hard to tie a bow on PCSing and say, this is all done, this is all wrapped up, we're settled in, we're moving on, when it's been 4 months. And I said this 2 years ago on our last PCS, is that the longer that a PCS drags on, the longer that we're living and not feeling settled, the harder that it is, the more stress that it adds, the more sense of feeling transitory and not feeling like you can put down roots, that it's really a place that you can call home. And so I am reminded over and over again every time that we PCS that this is a process, that stuff is just stuff. And what's more important than anything is to be mindful of my mental health and well-being, because there's a lot of excess stress that comes with managing a PCS. We have moved a lot. My 7-year-old is now in her 6th house, and my military life experience is one of PCSing or moving a lot. And I would like to say that I've gotten really good at it, but every time we go through this, I learn something else about myself. I learn something else about how to navigate this process well, and what's still really hard about it. And this PCS in particular was a summer of grief because we were leaving a place that we loved. And so it was grief for me, it was grief for my kids, and a lot of that grief didn't really hit them, and they weren't at a place where they could really talk about it until the end of the summer. And I think there was this still an element for my kids in particular of, this is all novel, it's new, we get to explore something that we don't remember because they were little the last time we were here. But then when that novelty wears off, then they're like, I really miss our last duty station. I really miss our friends. I really miss the school. All the things that we loved about the last duty station. And having those conversations with my kids, helping them walk through their big feelings and noticing my own big feelings and how to process those feelings in a healthy way so that I'm not becoming resentful, because I was not excited about this move. It's not where I want to be long term, but I do truly believe that there is something really good that is going to come out of this time, this season, this assignment, even if it's not what I wanted, even if it's not where I wanted to be. And knowing that to be true, because I have walked through all of these PCSs. And I know if this is the first time that you have moved and you're moving to a place that you don't love, that's hard. And you don't know that it gets better, that there are good things to come. But I want to tell you, as someone who has lived in 7 houses in the last 10 years, there are good things in every single assignment, in every single home that we have lived in. There is something good when you look for it. Now, sometimes that's easier to find than other times. There are definitely places that we love. There are definitely places that we love a lot less. But we have to look for the good. And when I start to do that, I am able to embrace what is while still honoring my feelings about what I left. So this summer, there was creating space for acknowledging my feelings, processing those feelings in a healthy way. So the second part of this particular PCS has been knowing that I have to shift my self-care routines again. One of the things that we talk about on the podcast is getting to know what it is that brings you joy. Because when I ask the question, what brings you joy? a lot of people don't know because a lot of life gets driven by all the other commitments we have, what everyone around us needs from us, and we forget to take care of ourselves and to know what it is that fills us up, what it is that breathes life into our soul, what it is that brings us joy. And for me personally, the last 4 years of living on islands, I have derived a lot of joy from getting to go stare at the ocean, from walking on the sand, from digging my toes into the water, from exploring all of the natural beauty on the islands. And that has brought so much life to my soul. Now, when I moved away from the continental US 4 years ago, I had to figure out all of my patterns, all of the ways that I used to derive joy changed because I could no longer just, go pick up a cup of coffee and go walk around Target because we initially moved to Guam where there is no Target. And so I had to shift. Let me figure out now what brings me joy. Here we are, 4 years later, moving back to the mainland, and I have to shift and figure out again what brings me joy that is available to me now. I cannot drive 5 minutes to the beach and get my ocean fix to bring myself joy. So what is available to me here that will breathe life to my soul? And that is a process that I am currently working through. Each season, each change is going to involve a rethinking of our routines, a rethinking of our self-care mechanisms, and knowing, okay, what is available to me here that will bring me joy, that will help fill me and fuel me so that I can show up for myself, for my family, and for pursuing the things that are on my heart. So that is the second thing that I am walking through right now. I'm walking through the season of grieving what we left, trying to embrace what is, and figuring out what is it that is going to bring me joy in this season. And then I guess the third major theme of this PCS is noticing my nervous system and my stress response. And that has come over time of learning what is triggering me, what is adding to my stress, and what do I do with this? And the interesting thing that I observed this summer in particular is that overall, this was a relatively smooth PCS compared to a lot of the traumatic PCSs we have walked through in the past. But the body keeps the score. The body remembers. And that was an element that surprised me a little bit this summer, that even though the stress of this PCS was not nearly to the level of some of our past PCSs, my body now associates PCSing, moving, with that stress response. My body immediately starts getting anxious and nervous and overwhelmed just with the thought of PCSing, just with the thought of not having a place to call home, not knowing where I was going to call home. And in particular, we went through this crazy pivot. We were struggling to find a place to live, and we had settled on a house that we were going to rent. It was off base, and we didn't necessarily love the pictures, but we're like, it seems like it's good enough. It'll be fine. And long story short, we get there and we were finally able to walk through the house, and it was not what we were hoping for. And we were a little disappointed with the way that the house looked and how it had really not been taken care of by the previous tenants. And so we had a week where we were trying to figure out, hey, is it possible to get out of this lease? What is available? Are we going to just have to go with this because that's the only option? And I could tell a whole story just about what happened in that 1 week. But we ended up living in a different rent house. And the whole story of how that happened is such a crazy story. But here's what I will say. In that week of not knowing what was going to happen and where we were going to end up living, my nervous system was going crazy. And like my stress and my anxiety levels were going all over the place. And it was one thing for me to really notice what is going on. It's not that I'm not going to end up with a place to live. Eventually, it's all going to work out and the right thing is going to happen. And this is all going to work itself out. This is a temporary situation. But my nervous system was going back to everything from past PCSs that has gone wrong. And it was freaking out. And I really had to go back to, okay, what is my body doing right now? What does it need? My body just needs to feel safe in this moment. I just need to do the things that are going to help my nervous system calm down in this moment. And that made a huge difference. But it goes back to those resilient strategies, that toolkit that we talk about building so that we understand that this is something that I don't have to freak out about. It is added stress, yes, but I now have the tools to be able to say, when I feel this way, when I experience this emotion, then I can tune in and say, what is actually going on in my body and what does my body need in this moment? Maybe it just needs some stretching. Maybe I just need to take a few deep breaths or to practice a grounding practice. But I am even more aware of how our body keeps the score. I read that book, it's probably been like 3 years now, but I am more and more amazed at the way that our body works, the way that our memories work, even to the unconscious level, and how that impacts our actions and behaviors. And the more that we become aware of that, the more that we can handle situations without going to that place of stress and overwhelm and anxiety and panic attacks, really, which is where I got to 4 years ago. And my body remembers that. Even though I am physically safe in this moment, that's what my body wanted to go back to. And so I had to learn, hey, my nervous system is just freaking out right now and I need to calm it down. And that helped me so much. So when I think about all the things that I walked through this summer, this 4-ish month PCS process, again, I am walking through processing grief. I am walking through learning how to take care of myself, to establish new self-care practices, to embrace what's coming, even if I am not particularly excited about what I know to be true in this moment, and then to be aware of my nervous system and to take care of my body so that I am not getting to that place of stress and overwhelm. Which brings me to where we are today. We have had this 10-week summer series all about tiny tweaks that we can make in our life that really help us to begin to transform our life from the inside out. And we've talked about the importance of rest. We've talked about our mental health and well-being. We've talked about our physical health and our nutrition. We've talked about our spiritual health and resilience. We've talked about cultivating a sense of home. We've talked about developing and growing our relationship with our spouse. We've talked about pouring into our kids or the next generation. We've talked about building healthy relationships. We've talked about how we manage our finances, and we've talked about how we pursue purpose as military spouses. And as we look ahead to the fall, it's a new season. And for some of us, it's not going to feel really new because we've been in that place for a while. Perhaps our kids are doing the same things that they've done in the past. But for many of us, it's a new season. It's a new, potentially, place that we live. But anytime that we move from summer into fall, it's a change of season. It's a really big change of season for me because not only are we moving to a new place, starting over, this is the first time that all 3 of my kids are in elementary school. And that's a big transition. When I started this podcast, it was a podcast as a mom with littles. And I am entering into this new season of life, and I'm trying to figure out what that looks like for me. But here's what I want us as a community to focus on as we move into the fall season. And that is into reconnecting with ourselves. Because I see this time and time again, all these things are happening around us that take our time and attention. And it's easy to lose sight of how we take care of ourselves and to really know ourselves well enough to take care of ourselves well enough. And that leads to feeling disconnected from our body, feeling disconnected from our mind, feeling disconnected from our purpose, feeling disconnected from who we are. And I want to help all of us get reconnected with who we are, with what our purpose is, and how we make the most of the life that we have. And that starts with reconnecting with ourselves. And so this 30-day clarity challenge is going to help move the needle towards helping you reconnect with yourself. It's really good as we are stepping into a new season to kind of rethink through, what is it that lights me up? What is it that brings me joy? What is it that are the practices that are going to help me care for myself in this season, that are going to help me connect with others in this season, and that are going to help me move towards a life with purpose? So if you are not already in our Facebook community, please come join us. You can find the link in the show notes, or just go to the website and you'll find the link there as well. Thank you for listening to today's conversation. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being who you are. You are an amazing milspouse, and you have something to offer the world. Until next time, may you live filled, fueled, and full of joy. Hey, amazing milspouse, before you go, I want you to know that I love hearing from you. The More Than a Milspouse community exists to help you thrive as a military spouse. Figure out what lights your heart on fire and empower you to live with purpose and impact. You can have an incredible impact simply by heading over to iTunes to subscribe and leave a review. But your impact doesn't stop there. You can empower those around you simply by sharing an episode with a friend or neighbor, someone who needs a little encouragement in this military life. And if this episode was meaningful to you, spread the love by taking a screenshot of this episode and tagging me on Instagram so we can continue to reach more people, change more lives, and shift the way that military spouses look at life. Because we are better together. Together, we can change the world. Let's do it.